Welcome in. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Whitmire, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. However you get your podcast, we're always appreciative for you tuning in. Maybe it's via our website on Northside Baseball, our YouTube channel, Apple Podcast, or an array of other ways that you can get the Northside Baseball Podcast. Jason, great to have you as always. Lot to talk about. I didn't know if it was too late to do a reaction to the trade deadline. I don't think it is. We haven't had a pod
No.
officially ended, and I think there's some people that are probably a little upset anyways, or maybe just not feeling fully satisfied with how the deadline went for the Cubs. But I thought, like, hey, should we start happy and talk about Justin Turner hitting a walk-off homer and how I had no idea that was the first walk-off homer of his career. I had no idea
about that either.
Yeah, but I thought we'd start a little more topical with Mike Soroka making his first start as a Chicago Cub. By the way, per the usual, we are recording on a Tuesday for a Wednesday publish. Soroka, his first start since getting traded to the Cubs Monday against Cincinnati, 2 innings, comes back to the dugout, says he has a shoulder injury going on, goes right on the IL. Craig Counsell didn't sound overly optimistic about it, I would say, in his post-game presser yesterday. Said he was going to the IL and really just didn't offer any sort of timeline, anything like that. I would just start by saying the timing obviously couldn't be any worse. Like, you acquire the guy, and then 2 innings in, he gets hurt, instantly placed on the injured list with a shoulder injury. And, you know, you somewhat have to wonder, like, you hope for Soroka and for the Cubs, obviously, like, they didn't trade Christian Franklin and Ronnie Cruz for 2 innings of Mike Soroka. Like, that would really, really suck. I did notice, too, I was looking back at some of his recent starts with Washington, and then what I was seeing, I was like, wait a second, am I just like, this can't just be like being tossed in my face? Like, am I missing something? And I went and looked into it more, and people were actually talking about it. His fastball velocity, Jason, dropped like a noticeable number in his last 3 starts with the Nats. So to me, like, and the Cubs did their own, medical check on him. I think that Soroka had said that the Cubs did their own MRI after they traded for him.
There was an MRI done on the 29th. It was right before his last start with the Nationals.
Got it.
I don't think that there was a second one afterwards, but The Athletic just posted an article about it today, and the MRI came back super clean. Like, they couldn't figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
With the fastball velocity, Matt had written an article about some interesting ways that he was using his fastball and some of his like mechanical things. So like, there's like almost an aspect of the mechanics that felt intentional. Like, his fastball shape changed. He was using it more up in the zone. And I think you can kind of look at it 2 ways. Like, one, is this a reaction to the lowered fastball velocity and the system handling it? But the mechanics kind of like played into improved shape, lower velocity. When you lower velocity, you increase shape, right? You create more break. Actually, I was just watching a video on cutters right before we started this. That was produced by Lance Brzezowski, who's the best pitching guy out there. And he was explaining, how teams get more shape on cutters. And one of the things that you do is you lower velocity, you increase shape. Well, he had lowered his velocity and his fastball shape increased. And then he was throwing it up more where that shape lives and breathes. Like, that's where that shape is. And, in our head, we think high fastball velocity, throw it up. But, Shota Imanaga is a great example of how 91 with shape up works really well. And Michael was kind of using that. So, his injury is like fascinating because, it seems like the MRI says it's fine. Or at least it was on the 29th, nothing obvious. Matt kind of showed that there was like some thought process behind it. One thing that I think that I noticed, and Matt noticed it in his article too, and kind of bring it up here, his arm slot increased. So he was throwing at a higher arm slot lately. So his release points gone up. When we increase arm slot, we increase pressure and stress on shoulder. When we lower arm slot, we increase on elbow. So it's kind of interesting that his arm slot increased and his shoulder is what he's claiming is feeling a little bit of pain. Edward Cabrera with the Marlins, who, we'll talk about the trade deadline here in a little bit. Wish he was with the Cubs. He had a similar kind of like speed bump recently where he felt issues in his elbow. He had a real short little break, but he lowered his arm slot this year. He's had shoulder issues in the past. Lowered his arm slot, loosens his arm up more, felt a little bit of pressure in the elbow, and I was talking to Matt about it. He said that he thought that it could just be one of these things where he's feeling a little extra stress in the new area because he changed his arm slot. Well, my best hope with Mike Soroka is that this is going to be, you're going to do another MRI. I'm sure they will. And they're going to find hopefully nothing. And that maybe what this is tied to is he's increased his arm slot. He's feeling a little bit of extra pull in his shoulder because of it, a little extra stress. And maybe we can get through this unscathed. That's the rosy view. I think, the negative view is that, yeah, you got 2 innings from him. That's it's a shoulder, and shoulders are not good. So, I don't want to make it seem like I'm just kind of blowing it away. There's so many reads we don't know. I'm not a doctor. You could give me his MRI. I couldn't read it anyways. But I guess that's my biggest hope is that, it could be a short stint, and he's back if it's just kind of that. And if it's not, if it's worse, and there's the arm slot change and all of that was a reaction to the shoulder not feeling good, which is the opposite way, right? You can make that argument. He's throwing a little bit different. The velocity slowed down. It created shape accidentally. None of this was intentional. It was all kind of accidental. And, he's just been hurting, and this is it. So we'll see. Bad timing, though.
Yeah, I think you just answered my question at the end there. I was going to ask whether because I don't, not trying to put you on the spot, whether you know the answer,
Yeah.
if it was in Matt's article, why he made the mechanical adjustment. Was that something he was working in unison with the Nationals on, or was it just it just happened accidentally and they didn't even notice it?
He has not reported a mechanical change.
Okay.
Matt noticed it with the way that he was coming down and throwing. He was creating, basically, with his foot placement, he was creating extra torque into his throw. So it's going to take away a little bit of velocity, add a little bit of movement, specifically glove side movement. Basically, it's almost a form of a cutter, basically taking the four seam, giving it a little bit of extra cut, but that's also helping it kind of play up in the zone. And he was throwing it more up in the zone. Now, the back end of that is usually when you raise your arm slot, you throw the ball up more anyways. So, I guess the question is, was all of that intentional, or was that a reaction to not feeling well? Because he has not said what it is. And, I doubt he really is going to say that, because if it's intentional, he's not going to tell the other team the playbook. On the flip side, if it's not intentional, I think you can kind of explain that away. So, my hope is, and we'll talk about this kind of with the trade deadline reaction too, is, I've seen it already online where people are basically been talking about in social media circles, basically Jed Hoyer gambled this away. He basically didn't do any due diligence. Everybody knew his velocity was down. This guy was hurt. And, there seems to be a subsect of Cubs fans that like to talk out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to Jed Hoyer. He's either both reckless in that he didn't do an MRI, didn't bother to look at the velocity, which anybody with the internet knew about this for the last 3 starts. If you were looking up anything on Mike Soroka, it was out there. If it's out there for us, it's out there for Jed.
Yep.
Basically, he ignored all of that. He's super reckless, but also he's too afraid to trade his prospects at the same time. He's not aggressive enough. So it seems like there's just this it just doesn't matter what he does to some people. He's always going to be he can be a conduit for either side. If you think he's reckless, well, he made a trade without getting an MRI. He picked up an injured guy. If you don't think he's reckless, he held on to all his prospects and he hugs them all the time. I come down on one of those sides. I'll talk about it more with the trade deadline reaction. I try to be a little bit more consistent than both sides. I don't think that the Cubs were reckless with it. They made the trade the day before the deadline. I think whatever information they had on Mike Soroka's velocity drop, they were not concerned about it at that time. Maybe they should have been more concerned about it. But I guess if you have an MRI done on the 29th and you make a trade on the 30th and it didn't come back ugly, I'm sure the Cubs saw it. I don't know what more you can do at that point. I guess you either A, don't trade for Mike Soroka at all, or B, you assume that the medicals and the MRI was fine. So I guess that's kind of, it's such a weird situation. I really am. I'm just hoping that his arm slot got high. he felt some added stress. He's back in mid-August, and we're good to go. But I mean, yeah, there's probably a real chance that we don't see him pitch in the Cubs uniform again, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's crazy. I will say too. I mean, there's like a 0% chance the Cubs traded for Soroka, and then he gets hurt, and they're like, "Wait, his fastball velo dropped in his last 3 starts? What? Why
Yeah.
were we like?" I've seen that pocket of Cubs fans that you're talking about that are like, "Oh my God, like I brought up his fastball velo because like
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of it, and then when I saw it, I was like, wait, this seems like a little bit of red flags. So then I started digging into it, and it's like, okay, like there were people talking about it, and so then naturally I know like the Cubs were aware of that. That's like front office malpractice, Jay. Like you and I can both know that. Like if they traded for Soroka, like if Jed Hoyer came out today or tomorrow or whenever and was like, we really didn't see that his fastball velo had dropped in the last 3 starts. Like, yeah, it was a red flag. I'd be like, oh my God. Like they knew. They had to have known that, and they saw the results of the MRI that was taken on the 29th, and they thought everything checked out. And now, like you said, it just sucks. Like there's a possibility we only see 2 innings of Mike Soroka, and that's it. Let's pivot if you're ready to the sort of your trade deadline reaction, my trade deadline reaction. I will say, and I hate having to use this as one of the examples, but like the Soroka trade and then the subsequent injury after 2 innings in a Cubs uniform is why, to me, you can't play things conservatively and expect that to even be safe. Like the trade deadline there, to me, especially in baseball with pitchers in their arms, there's no like guaranteed safe trade. There just isn't. And I think Jed Hoyer, like, I was disappointed at the deadline, and I was disappointed at Jed saying, well, none of the top arms went. And then he was like pointing at other teams, like they didn't, trade for a big arm, and Joe Ryan stayed put, Mackenzie Gore. Like he didn't say specific names, but he said that top tier of arms. And I get that, but to me, there were still a handful of like quality starters dealt, like Merrill Kelly. Adrian Hauser's having a good year. Charlie Morton, I thought, was toast in April and May, and then he figured it out, and he turned it on like
he look at his June numbers or July numbers, because they were atrocious.
Was it okay?
Somebody brought that up to me recently because I hadn't been keeping super tabs on him. I wrote an article about him like right before he fell right back off a cliff. So Charlie Morton has been bad for a while again.
Gotcha.
So I was a fan of him. Like
his first start with Detroit went well on Sunday night against the Phillies. I saw that too, but I hear you. I wasn't tracking him. I just saw like the last time I checked in on Charlie Moore and he had appeared to turn around. I don't know. Like there were a few starting pitchers to me. Like I just thought the Cubs needed to do more than Mike Soroka in that category. And that's not looking back on it now because of the injury thing. I thought that at the time the deadline ended and the Cubs had only added Soroka as a starting pitcher. I'll say this too. And then I'll let you run with it any direction you want, Jason. Jed not willing to stretch his neck out even once to slightly overpay. To me, at some point, you're going to have to. And I'm not suggesting you need to be Preller. You don't need to be, that aggressive, that radical. This just seemed like one of those spots to me where you don't know if Kyle Tucker's going to come back with the Cubs. We don't know what's going to happen this winter. We hope he does. But to me, this was a spot where I think at some point you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable if you're Jed Hoyer and dishing out some solid prospects, trending in the right direction, and get a Joe Ryan or get a Mackenzie Gore and just sort of accept the fact that, hey, maybe I slightly overpaid, but we, the Cubs, got something great and got something proven and got a pitcher with team control. I was pretty surprised when the deadline came and went, and that was what the Cubs added in Soroka and Rogers and Kittredge and Willie Castro. Some names that I like too, but I thought they would try to take a big swing, and I was wrong. I was wrong about that because I thought Jed would look at this situation for this year and say, we're going to push some chips into the middle of the table, but that name we're going to get, if it's a Gore or Ryan, we're also going to have them for the next couple of years too. But we have Kyle Tucker now. We have this lineup now. We clearly need, if we want to compete in October with some of these heavy hitters, we need to add another arm at the top of the rotation or near the top of the rotation. So I was pretty disappointed because I just thought this was a spot for them to sort of pounce and attack. And I did not like that. When he spoke, it might have been the night of the deadline. He was on Marquee.
Yeah.
He was sitting in the studio. Yeah. And he said, well, none of the top arms went. And it was just like, well, I don't really want to hear that right now. Like one of them could have went to you, but the prospect hugging thing that people bring up, I think it's easier for those people to hammer at home. I'm not trying to like completely rain down on Jed Hoyer. I certainly thought this was a point, a season, a spot where they could pounce, attack, get a really good arm, maybe slightly overpay, but at times again you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I
Yeah.
don't think he has that type of mindset where he wants to get even slightly uncomfortable with whatever prospect package he would be giving up in a trade like
No.
that.
In our Slack channel, we had a great comment that somebody made, and I ended up taking it and running with a whole article with it because I just thought it was such a great framing device. But Matt Ostrowski said, the thing about Jed Hoyer is he always picks up his pizza. He never orders delivery, and I think that's perfect with Jed. In Jed Hoyer fashion, I'm going to lay it out, kind of the positives and the negatives. I don't think he made a bad trade. I think every one of those trades are perfectly fine, and it's perfectly valued. If you want to quibble that maybe they gave up a little too much on a Ronnie Cruz, or maybe they shouldn't have given up like a 17-year-old Wilfrey De La Cruz in the Kittredge trade, I mean, be my guest. I think you're quibbling at that point, and you're splitting hairs. We're talking about a kid who hasn't turned 18 yet. He's going to flame out probably in almost all scenarios outside of very, very small ones. Christian Franklin, I like Christian Franklin. I've written positively about him. He's a backup outfielder. You can find those everywhere. Ronnie Cruz, he's got a 91 WRC plus in the lowest level of baseball he could be at right now in the ACL. Developmental prospect. There's lots to like there. He's not a finished product, and what finished product Ronnie Cruz looks like, we don't really know, but chances are he flames out before AA. We didn't probably give up a single prospect we will think about in 3 or 4 years. And we got back useful players. Willie Castro, I have a feeling he's going to almost become like maybe like a Nick Castellanos light over the course of the next couple of months. A little bit of a good player. I think we're going to really like him. I think Andrew Kittredge is a really fun addition to the bullpen. Taylor Rogers, I think you can get something there. Mike Soroka, I wrote positively about him. I think all of these trades are perfectly fine. On the back end, where I think they failed is, on one hand, when Jed says something about none of the best starting pitchers were traded, he's not wrong. But it's also a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. How many teams were really swimming in that market? 2, 3, maybe the
That's a
Cubs
great
and the
point.
Red Sox. So if you aren't one of the 2 or 3 teams who makes that trade, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in some fashion, shape, or form. Like nobody was expecting the Rockies to make that trade. You could have eliminated, probably out of the 30 teams, there were probably maybe 4 to 5 teams who even had the ability to. And then you talk about like need and want to make that trade. I mean, you were really talking about like the Astros were getting connected to some of these guys. The Red Sox were getting connected to Joe Ryan. And then you had the Cubs connected to everybody. And so when you are one of the 3 teams who are being connected in those 3 things and you don't make a trade, it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I will give him a slight out if the prices were as extreme as they were, right? They were completely unmovable. They were insane. I don't fully buy that. I think especially like maybe Edward Cabrera was probably doable, hurt, but it would doable. But let's give him benefit of the doubt. Let's say there wasn't. Then that's fine. As it's your job in that moment then to pivot, and there's other pivots. If you can't get the starting pitcher, I will allow that. We can say that. Cool, you can't get the starting pitcher. Then go get Jake Bird. Go get David Bednar. Go get Varland go get those
Griffin
guys.
Jacks,
Griffin Jacks.
All of
You
them.
go
Yeah,
trade.
any of them.
You go trade for those guys. I don't even need you to trade for Mason Miller because we're not trading the number 3 prospect in baseball for a reliever. But you can't tell me that the prices on Bednar and Bird and Varland were insane. They weren't. If the starting pitching market was crazy, and we do have a little bit of knowledge behind that, Shane Bieber went for a prospect who's gotten top 100 love. He's going to pitch maybe 8 starts in the regular season. They already said he's 2 starts still in the minors to go. That's going to push him to about 8 starts in the regular season. Okay, fine. Then go build a bullpen of doom, because even if we're sitting here and we're saying, well, in that rotation spot, it's going to be Jordan Wicks, it's going to be Ben Brown, then behind that, you've got, if you only have to ask those guys to throw 4 innings because you've got Bednar, you've got Burt, you've got a bullpen of doom, you're going to survive. And I don't think that the Cubs pivoted properly in some way, shape, or form. And I think that comes down to that concept that, listen, Jed Hoyer is the best parts about Jed Hoyer is I don't think he will ever make a trade that is terrible. Like, we will never have a terrible Jed Hoyer trade. We're never going to look at a trade and go, "Oh my God, what is he doing? What is he thinking?" And you can look at his entire history of all of his contracts and all of his trades, and I don't think that there is like an obviously bad one. Maybe you don't like a small trade. Maybe you don't like they paid a little bit too much for this. You think 1 year too many here, but there's not a terrible deal out there. Like, you didn't. There's not a single move out there that you go, "Oh my God, what are they
Yeah.
doing?" But on the back end, because he is very value oriented, and I think he's very good at identifying value on players. I mean, so good that he becomes inflexible in his moments where he has decided that he just doesn't highly value relievers. So his pivot is none. He can't pivot to there because he's not going to slightly overpay for a David Bednar. He's not going to slightly overpay for a starting pitcher. For him, value is value, and that's why I love that that quote about delivery and picking up the pizza, because for him, saving the delivery fee and spending only the gas, that's what he's looking at. He's not looking at any of the context around that. And I think his inflexibility is both the thing that I love about him the most. I think the reason we have Pete Crow Armstrong today, we have Kevin Alcantara in the minor leagues, we have these guys is because he becomes inflexible at the deadline. And if you're going to buy a player from him, well, damn it, you're going to meet this is what the price is, right? And we saw that with Wilson Contreras. When his price didn't get met, he did not trade Wilson Contreras. He is very hard on that value, but I think we see the back end of that when it comes to buying, that when you sell, you have the position of power, but when you buy and you become inflexible and unwilling to pay, I think that's why we don't win these big free agent bids, because he's got kind of a price and that's it. I think that's probably also why, like at the deadline, I don't think the Cubs are ever going to be the story. And I joked that my minor league report was going to be made a lot easier. And if the biggest failure that I think we have, and to put it in a way, is that the Cubs didn't trade any of their like bona fide top 10 prospects. Like, they kept them all. The closest thing to a top 10 prospect they gave up was like how you feel about Christian Franklin if you have him like 9th to 12th. Like, that was the highest ranking prospect that they gave up. And that we're sitting here with a full top 10, I think is a failure. Not because I want to just give these prospects away, but because they didn't trade anybody who was worth a top 10 prospect. And they can come back in the winter, but how much, like, I guess my biggest issue with the trade deadline is like, what's the plan here? Like, how many outfielders do you think you can start next year? Owen Casey and Kevin Alcantara are going to be major league ready next year. They have to play Major League Baseball. If they're sitting in the minor leagues, you start to lose things. At what point? At what point do we capitalize on these things? How many DH do you think you can have? Moises Baez and Jonathan Long both can't be your DH next year, especially if you've you're already got Casey and Alcantara. Like, there's kind of a backlog on some of these guys, and do you think controllable starting pitching is going to be cheaper in December? We already didn't make a trade for one last December because it was too expensive. We couldn't get Garrett Crochet. We couldn't get the deal done with Miami because of medicals. They didn't pivot to anything else to get it done. So if the prices were too expensive last winter and they were too expensive at the deadline, I don't think they're getting magically cheaper this December. I don't think that the value of any of these players is getting more. I think at this point, the best you have is that Owen Casey maintains value. 2 more months at AAA of lowering his strikeout rates, probably not going to really raise it at this point. And by the end of the season, he'll have over 1,000 plate appearances in Iowa. There kind of comes a point when you just go, well, okay, well, is it just because he's too good for the level now? So I don't really know what the strategy is. And yeah, they can still make that trade in December. Like, it's still there. And yeah, maybe they don't sign Kyle Tucker, but even if they don't re-sign Kyle Tucker, that's one spot for 4 players in Iowa who are all ready, right? They're all going to be ready. There's just not, there comes a point when you have to be okay moving them. And I guess like my biggest trade deadline reaction is like, if not then when? Like,
Yeah.
when? and I don't know when. And I've tried to be patient with it. I've tried to be calm and be like, well, okay, maybe not in but at the deadline for sure. Like they'll have flexibility, they'll be able to bully, and they didn't do it again. And I'm now at a point where I guess like I don't understand what the long-term vision is. And most of the time I can like logic my way through with Jed's concepts, but like I guess I don't know what he's thinking at this point. And it just I I'm confused by it. We'll see what ends up happening. I fear it's going to come back and bite us in some way in 2025, and I don't think it had to. And then they're going to have to try to, I mean, basically forced to fix this situation a little bit in December now. When I guess I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. A couple things I want to bounce off of
Yeah.
what you just said. Um, you said something that made me, open up the can of worms with like a secondary and then a tertiary thought to it.
Yeah.
When you had brought up like, yeah, Jed saying none of these top arms were traded, which is what I was saying too. But then
Yeah.
you mentioned like the amount of teams that were really in line to make a move like that was pretty slim, like Cubs,
Yeah.
Boston. To me, the Mets are always unpredictable. Like they could have used maybe a top of the rotation arm, but like, yeah, Cubs, Boston, there weren't that many teams. And so right when you said that, Jason, I started wondering like, okay, so was this just like truly Jed looking at like, oh man, the price for Sandy Alcantara is just truly insane. Like even we would look at what Miami was wanting and we'd be like, yeah, that's way too much. And was it the same for Cabrera? Was it the same for Mackenzie Gore and Joe Ryan? Or was this just Jed looking at all those and being like, well, I don't want to part with this prospect and goes back to sort of that prospect hugging thing? Because again, the Cubs were one of the real few teams that were in the market for a true stud starting pitcher, and that was like priority A. And so that's where it got me thinking like I just wonder if this was Jed not wanting to stick his neck out that one time and make a really bold move for the Cubs rotation. And yeah, it is kind of disappointing. I do think, and I'm focused on 2025, but again, when you were talking about the winner and stuff, and my mind went down another rabbit hole. I hate saying this too. I hate saying it. I feel like the Cubs are going to lose Kyle Tucker in the winter, and then they're going to cover it up by trying to work out a big extension with PCA and then hyping up Owen Casey has arrived too, which again, like I'm excited for Owen Casey if it ends up going that direction, but I think it would be like the sneaky move for the Cubs, like to try to save face. Does that make sense to you at all? Like I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, but I think they're going to try to save. I can see a scenario exactly like that, Jason. Not somewhat similar, but exactly like it, where they lose Kyle Tucker in free agency. It gets to be a bidding war. Ricketson is like, no, Jed, no. Tucker goes somewhere else. And then they say face by, look, we just signed PCA to a 9-10 year deal, whatever it is. And then, hey, Owen Casey, he's ready to play anyways. We have so many outfielders like, yeah, it stinks losing Kyle Tucker, but we have Owen Casey ready. So I can see a scenario like that playing out in the winter, and it wouldn't necessarily be fun. And then the last thing I want to throw your way, am I having is my memory running me in the wrong direction? Or when the Cubs traded Cody Bellinger for nothing except to get off the salary, I thought there were conversations circulating like, well, when the trade deadline rolls around, like this one that we just had, the Cubs could maybe go for a shinier, a bigger name that maybe has a little bit of a fat contract that they would have to partially pay off too for the last 2 months. Like I might be wrong in that, but I thought when Bellinger was traded and there was an uproar from some people who were like, you just traded Bellinger for nothing, recognizing, yeah, there's a lot of outfielders in place, but again, you got nothing back for Bellinger except, the Yankees take on the salary. I thought there were people and reporters saying, well, the Cubs will plan to be, very active at the deadline and could take on a big deal now. And then that didn't happen.
Yeah, there was talk that the Cubs would reinvest that money, and
yes,
I know that there has been some discourse that they didn't. If you look at the money that they spent directly after that, which was Ryan Presley, which obviously didn't work out, which was Justin Turner's, which I don't think we're giving credit to it working out as well as it probably has. He's like a 124 WRC plus against lefties. Like it's better than last year. Like I think we're a little harsh on what Turner's brought. But that money actually balances out with what they saved from Cody Bellinger. So in theory, they kind of did reinvest that. I don't want to give full credit for this because I think this is one of my kind of kind of back to the point with Jed, is they did make an attempt to sign Tanner Scott to a real big deal. They
Yeah.
did make an attempt to sign Alec Bregman. In fact, I think they made very earnest attempts on both of those. Like they were
Good point.
legitimate contracts. They were an attempt. However, and this is going to be my big but on that situation, at some point, ifs and buts don't pay the bills. And effort is great, but at the end of the year, the Cubs don't get an extra 3 games in the standings because they tried real hard to get Alex Bregman and do something. At some point, you have to get a little irrational and get some of these deals over the line. So, I think that there was an earnest attempt to respend that, but they have done nothing with it. So, end result is, cool effort, I guess, but at the same time, like, finish something, get it over the line. You've got to get something over the line, whether it's Tanner Scott or Alex Bregman or Mackenzie Gore or David Bednar or something. The Cubs have just, I think they've made a lot of attempts, but they're just out there trying and not getting anything done when it needs to be. And I think the hallmark of Jed Hoyer over the last probably like 2 years feels like one short. The Cubs are always one impact player short. I think they were probably one impact player short from making the playoffs last year. I think they're one impact player short from where they should be this year, both at the start of the season, with their attempt to get Scott or Bregman. I think that they're one impact player short now. They didn't address an impact player at the deadline. They got useful players, but and I guess you could say that Willie Castro, he will make a good impact on the team, but he's not an impact player. This is not the kind of player that either wins or loses you probably a playoff series. And the Cubs are still one impact player short. And if they go into the offseason and they don't re-sign Kyle Tucker and they re-sign Pete Crow Armstrong and they reinvest that money, because the one thing I will say is that even for the Cubs to get up to the paltry level of spending this year, if they don't sign Kyle Tucker, they basically have to spend $70 million in free agency next year. Like, you're talking like you're going to get like a Bregman and a Michael King and another pretty good player. If they add all of that, I'm going to be honest with you, that team's still one impact player short. It really is. It's still one impact player short. So, I just, we'll see what it is. I don't hate Jed Hoyer. I think his extension didn't play any part of it. I've seen people try to say, well, he got the extension, so he didn't care. I don't think that's Jed Hoyer at all.
No.
Very much, I believe that it all boils down to Jed Hoyer has a very black and white view on value. This is value. This is not value. I won't break my valuations. And to a degree, I respect the hell out of that a bit, because, he's incredibly well-disciplined to be that value oriented. But, I don't need him to become full cowboy AJ Preller, but it would probably help Jed Hoyer just a little bit if he had just a little bit more AJ Preller in him, to where when he found a guy he really wanted, that he made it happen. And he just doesn't seem to have that instinct to him. And I don't know, maybe he'll prove us wrong in the offseason. We'll sign Kyle Tucker to $450 million. We'll all look stupid. I still want to be optimistic on that aspect, but yeah, I don't, right now I am bummed out by the trade deadline. I still think the team probably going to make the playoffs, but
they will for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think they missed another opportunity. And at some point, effort is cool, but you can't stop. You can't miss every opportunity to improve your team. And it just feels like when given the opportunity to improve their team, the Cubs just come up just a little short every single time.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to note on the trade deadline, if you don't mind, Jason.
Yeah.
There's more than one way to win. And I think sometimes I thought of this when you were talking about a pivot, and you said like the Cubs just didn't have a pivot at the trade deadline. It was like, get a starting pitcher, a really good one, maybe can slot in as your 2 or 3. And they just didn't do that. And then, as you said correctly, they just didn't pivot. And I look at what the Mets did at the deadline, and they could have used, a top of the rotation starter somewhere around there. And instead they get Ryan Helsley, Tyler Rogers, 2 really good relievers. And it's like, oh, well, they already have Edwin Diaz, and the Mets are kind of going, I I don't know if you agree with this or not, but like the Dodgers won the World Series last year, and I thought their bullpen played like maybe the most important part for them.
Absolutely.
Like, hey,
Their
starters, first off, we
their
don't
starters
have,
were they
yeah,
didn't have a single starter who made it 100 innings last year.
yeah.
Not one.
And
Their
then,
their rotation in the playoffs was Yamamoto, who, listen, he didn't make 100 innings. He's a very good pitcher. But
yeah,
beyond that, it was Walker. Beeler was like
yeah,
their second, and then they just went with bullpen games. So you can, like, if you can get a starter, get a starter. But yeah,
yeah.
build a bullpen of doom if you can. And the Cubs didn't do that.
Yeah. So you're getting at my point too. My point
Yeah.
was like the Dodgers, I thought last year, and like, oh, Otani, Freeman, Betts, that three-headed monster in the lineup. Like, yes. But I thought their bullpen carried the heaviest weight because they A, didn't have many starters available, B, the quality, like, I don't know. And it was basically like, can you give us 4 or 5 and then we'll take the bullpen the rest of the way? And I thought the Mets might have looked at that blueprint and said, you know what? Yeah, we have Edwin Diaz, but now we have Helsley and Rogers. And if the Mets get to the postseason, they're going to be in a spot where they can tell their starters, like, if you give us 6, like, that'd be phenomenal because we have the 7th, 8th, and 9th, like, we feel on lockdown. If you give us even 5, great. But, like, I liked what the Mets did where it was like, I don't know exactly what route they were trying to take, but they settled, and not even settled. They went all in on this idea of, like, let's just stack the bullpen. Like, when I look at the NBA, Boston won it last year, and it was spread the court 5 wide, shoot a million threes a game. But past years, it was like, you need a big 3. And it was like, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry. And then when LeBron had Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving, but now the new CBA doesn't allow that. And then this year, it was OKC and Indiana, 2 teams who go 11 deep. And this entire NBA offseason has been like, wow, you need depth. And so I thought for the Cubs, like, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Everyone, including us, wanted them to get a top of the line starting pitcher to go on that rotation, to go along with Shota, to go along with Matthew Boyd, because something's going to obviously have to be done with Cade Horton's innings at some point in time. Different story for a different day. But there should have been a pivot, and they just never did that. And it's so frustrating when I look at the Mets, who, again, I don't know. I'm not a Mets fan. I'm not in, Mets social media circles following Mets content creators. I don't know if their plan all along was to go heavy on the bullpen. But if it wasn't, they pivoted perfectly, in my opinion, to say,
good job.
Screw it, let's just load up on bullpen arms. And now they feel really good about having a 7th, 8th, and 9th on lockdown. And the Cubs just were like, I like Kittredge too. Taylor Rogers, he's fine. But are they, lights out dynamite? Like, no. And there was just no pivot for the Cubs. And I think that was really, really, really frustrating. I'm not saying they needed to go out and like overpay for Johan Duran or something like that. But as you mentioned, like, Bednar didn't go for like a king's ransom. And the Yankees kind of went with that too. And I know,
I liked the Yankees deadline a lot. Bednar and Bird, those are my guys.
And they optioned. I saw they optioned Bird today, which is kind of crazy. But they still went with that method of like, Bird, really good in Colorado this year, get him. Bednar, really good track record, resume in Pittsburgh, get him. And they kind of went with what the Mets ended up doing. So, yeah, I think I would put a bow on my deadline thoughts, similar to what you said, disappointed. And then some of the stuff you were saying, Jason, just brought it like allowed me to expand my own thoughts and ideas to like really see how frustrating it is that there was no pivot. There was
nothing.
Hey, if plan A doesn't work and we can't get Edward Cabrera or a Sandy Alcantara or a Joe Ryan or Mackenzie Gore, then what? The Cubs just didn't have a then what. It was okay. We're just, filler pieces, kind of.
Yeah,
is what it's going to be.
I think it felt like he waited it out as long as he could, and this is what was left. And when you play a game of chicken and nobody blinks, then that's what it was. And I love that Jed Hoyer is so principled that that he believes in his valuation so much. That's why I like every move he makes. I can see the logic behind it. Even when I don't love a move, like you look at it later and you're like, oh, now I understand what they were doing with Colin Ray.
Yeah.
Like I get it now. Now, okay, that's what Matthew Boyd was. It all makes sense. It just the ability to like make it happen, whatever it is in that moment, he just doesn't have that ability most of the time.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be an important kind of Achilles heel that the Cubs have for the rest of 2025, and we'll see what it does in the offseason.
Yeah, the moves he makes are hard to complain about, but the moves he doesn't make are the ones that kind of bring about the scrutiny.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good way to
That's
put
a
it.
good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Widmeyer, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. You see it on your rundown if you're watching the video version of this. What's up with Kyle Tucker? What's going on with Kyle Tucker? I don't know if this was unfair for me to put down on the agenda, because I feel like, Jason, I probably could have said, hey, let's just label it what's going on with like Kyle Tucker, PCA, Seiya Suzuki, like a lot of these heavy hitters in the
There's a
lineup
lot of
that,
guys who are struggling right now.
yeah, but struggling. I saw a couple days ago like Kyle Tucker before July and since July 1st, and it is quite the difference. His hard hit percentage. Again, this is since July 1st compared to before July 1st. Obviously, hard hit percentage dropped 18%, barrel percentage dropping 10%, exit velos down. To me, I like Kyle Tucker, still Kyle Tucker. That means he's really damn good, but it is certainly like a perplexing stretch that he's sort of going through at the dish. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
So when you put that on there, I immediately jumped to StatCast and I was like, let's start looking at data. And I know there's been discourse that like this goes back, people think that this goes back to like when he rolled over his finger and he hurt it in June. But he was fine in June. I do not believe that this is a finger issue. I do not believe he is hurt. However, when you go to his data, couple things that I noticed. First off, bat speed down. Bat speed's not there. It's gone down, and it's just a little bit. It's a couple miles an hour, but it's noticeable. It really is there. His attack angle is down. His ideal angle is down. His barrel percentage is down. His exit velocity is down. But you look at his approach data, right? Is he chasing the ball? No. Is he expanding the zone? No. So my guess is that there's something mechanical there. I think it's a small mechanical thing, and it's stopping him from being the guy that he wants to be, because it's not like he's going out there and swinging at bad pitches. If it was an approach issue, we would see that in chase percentage, barrel, and like whiff percentage and all that perfectly fine. In fact, it's all great. But yeah, there is a downward spiral. Now, I will say this, that basically over the course of the last couple of days, things like hard hit percentage going back up, his swing tilt going back up, his ideal angle percentage going down still. But there are some aspects in there that have been kind of trending up lately that make you think, I think he's kind of coming out of it. I wouldn't say he's completely out of it right now, and you could just kind of watch the game and you just see a little bit of frustration. But he did have 2 hits against Baltimore a couple days ago. So I think we're just gonna have to kind of ride it out. As much as it's been annoying. Let me ask you this: what do you think his WRC plus for the last 45 plate appearances he has?
Is it like normal Kyle Tucker? Like
131.
Yeah.
So like there's not the home runs, right? There's only 2 doubles in there. Like, the power isn't completely flashing right now, but he's not like broken. So
yeah, that's why I said Kyle Tucker's still Kyle Tucker.
Right.
There's just some odd
still Kyle Tucker.
Yeah.
So I think once the power really kind of pops back up, I think we're going to be fine. So I would guess that there's, I'd have to really dive into the mechanics to figure it out. And I haven't had a chance to really like super dive into like all the like the tiny little minutia of like his shoulder and his front foot and everything like that. It's a lot harder to kind of pick up those little things than like when Matt Shaw like completely changes where his foot placement is. But I think it's probably small. I think it's mechanical. There's too many other things that he's doing that's good that makes me think he will be fine shortly. Like I said, there's a lot of trend in there that like makes me think that we're okay. We just got to get there. It might even just be like 1 home run. Like if he can pull one out tonight, then all of a sudden, we could be looking at a hot streak. So yeah, I don't know. Hope we can get over this quick, because I hate seeing him struggle. Because you can see a little bit of frustration with him too.
Yes, 100%. Really, the whole lineup there's a lot of frustration. PCA,
Yeah,
whenever he gets in a slump, he's like slamming his bat down more. Helmet,
he is an emotional dude.
yeah, which I'm fine with, is what it is. So yeah, hopefully the lineup gets it going. Let's pivot to your minor league report. I will say, as soon as I saw that Ivan Bretower was dealt in a deal, I thought you were the first person I thought of at the trade
I hate
deadline.
I hate when they trade my favorite mediocre prospect.
Yeah, but
Let's have
minor
to
league
pick a new
report.
one.
Yeah, minor league report is all yours, Jason.
Cool. So with the minor league report, we're kind of in a weird spot right now where a couple of these guys we kind of expected to be gone and they're all still here. But we're also at a point where our draft picks recently are starting to pop up. Cade Snell was our 5th round draft pick from Alabama. He was immediately placed at South Bend, so we're going to see how that goes. He had some good stuff going on in the SEC, but defensively he's kind of limited. I think he could be like kind of a Jonathan Long type prospect. So keep an eye on South Bend. For him popping up. Josiah Hartshorn is down in the ACL. He's playing exclusively first base right now. Do think he's going to get some outfield love. Probably he'll spend time in the ACL completely. Moving away from some of our recent draft picks. Oh, just Kane Kepley will also be signed to a place pretty soon. I think he's down in Arizona, and we won't see Ethan Conrad 1st round draft pick in 2026. So Cubs already said he's taking time off with his shoulder. He'll be in 2025. We'll see him in 2026. So kind of short recaps there. Start in Iowa. Positives. Casey remains hot. 137 WRC plus, has the K percentage still under 20%. I know that there's going to be people who are going to tell you to bring him up to major leagues. Let's see what he can do. Don't think that's going to look good right now. Probably just keep him in Iowa unless there's an injury. Maybe put him on the bench in September when rosters expand. We'll see, but I just don't think we're going to see him right now. Big Mo Ballers hitting 438, has a home run in his last game, 228 WRC plus, looking really good.
What'd you call him?
Mo Baller.
I
Big
love
Mo.
that. Let's go.
Yeah,
is that
Mo
a
Baller.
known nickname?
Yeah, Mo Baller. Yeah,
I
great name.
feel a lot of the loop that I didn't know that. That's an incredible. I love that nickname.
Yeah, that was my 2 favorite minor league nicknames are Mo Baller and the Big Maple for Owen Casey.
Big Maple, I knew. Yeah, Mo Baller.
Yeah, Big Maple. I love Big Maple.
That's awesome.
Jonathan Long struggling a little bit. K percentage a little elevated. It's just a week. Happens. He's had a great season. We can ignore it. Kevin Alcantara also strikeout rates way back up. He had a really weird week. So the numbers are strange. He had a 41.7% strikeout rate. He had a 70 WRC plus. You immediately go awful week. He had a 2 home run game and a 4 strikeout game. So weird, within 2 games of each other. So really weird week for Kevin. Read into the numbers how you want. 4 strikeout games going to do a lot of damage to you there. Also in Iowa, Will Sanders was great. 8 strikeouts in 6 innings, only walked 2. Fastball velocity wasn't super high. It was kind of sitting 92, 93. He tends to sit a little bit higher than that. Brandon Birdsell is working his way back. Same thing for him. Struck out 6 in 6 innings. Fastball velocity a little low there too. But he's coming back from an injury, so we'll let it be. I still think that we're probably going to see a Brandon. There's a decent chance we see a Brandon Birdsell start throughout this year. I like him as a back end kind of starter. So might be some opportunities for him. With the injury, less so, but wouldn't be surprised. Porter Hodge threw a clean inning. Great inning thing for him. 10 pitches, 8 strikeouts, 8 strikes. So lots of strikes. Wasn't crazy. He'd been kind of struggling with control lately. Sat 95, 96. So a little under velocity. I don't know if the gun was just kind of running slow. Because kind of pretty consistent that guys were maybe 1 or 2 miles an hour shorter than what we're used to seeing them at. So could be a thing there. A little bit further down the kind of the minor leagues. First off, Ty Southazine is a draft pick from last year. It's 4th round draft pick. We were able to get him out of a Tennessee commit, so not cheap. Tennessee is one of the better SEC schools. He's having an interesting go of it in Myrtle Beach. He's gotten his WRC plus over 100, so he's better than league average. He's 19, so he's young. And Myrtle Beach is a tough place to hit. He is walking as many times as he strikes out, and there are weeks, just like the last week, he walked more than he struck out. So the approach, super plus. He has displayed no power. We're talking like none. So if you can get some pop, and he's not a big kid, he's a small guy, but if you can get some power out of this guy, there's something there. He plays shortstop. Keep an eye on him. I think he's a deep cut prospect that I'm curious about moving forward. Jackson Kirkpatrick, who's, I'm just going to replace Ivan Brett Tower and go with the relief pitcher on this one. My new favorite. But he faced 7 hitters, struck out 4 more. I'd seen, I think it might have been Greg Huss on X, or maybe it was Brad Balls Walk. I can't remember which one it was, but they mentioned that they would love to see Kirkpatrick in the Arizona Fall League, and sign me up for that. I think he's a great example to go to the Arizona Fall League. You don't see a lot of pitchers with big stuff go there. He's a relief pitcher, so he's got innings probably. He's coming out of the tread system, so this is a Zombro guy. I would love to see him get that, because the hitting in Arizona is legit, and I would like to see what he can do. He's still down low. And then we'll finish it up with Grant Kipp, who's probably going to become your new Sean Gallagher or Ryan Gallagher. I know we traded Gallagher. That's probably the one prospect. That's, if there was one kind of a bummer prospect that we gave up, it was Gallagher. For anybody worried about it, we give up one of these. We get one of these guys every year. This pop-up pitching prospect that kind of pops out of nowhere. Sam Armstrong was a guy the year before, also coincidentally in the same trade with the Twins. But Grant Kipp feels like he could be an interesting one to keep an eye at. He threw 5 innings, struck out 6, 1 earned run. And actually, I want to finish up with one other kind of deep cut prospect for anybody who's out there who wants just kind of a fun guy to follow along. Now, we'll admit, last start, not particularly great. But Tyler Schlafer is a 2019 draft pick. So we're talking years now. But he's missed plenty of time with injury over his career. Last year, he pitched well at times, started this year hurt, didn't really see him. He has been in Knoxville now for 26 innings. It hasn't been as good or as dominating as we saw prior. His last start in high A was 10 strikeouts, 7 innings. So he was cruising. But he's an interesting prospect to follow in Double A. He struck out 5 in his last 6 innings. He also walked 5. So, like I said, not a great start. But he's kind of a deep cut pitching prospect that I could see kind of maybe working out a little bit. He feels a little, and he's right-handed, but he's 24 years old. He feels a little bit kind of like Justin Steele, where there was always stuff. He kind of battled injuries, and if he put it together, he could be a thing. So, that we're gonna, with the kind of mid-tier prospects that we lost, I gotta kind of find fun deep cut prospects before the 2025 draftees get going. If you want my prediction for the 2026 version of Ryan Gallagher, I will say 3rd round pick Dominic Reed kind of fits that. I think with an off season, we're talking about him next year. His changeup profiled almost identical to Tyler Bremner, and Tyler Bremner went number 2 overall. The difference is that Bremner has a better fastball than Dominic Reed, but Zombro and Tread Athletics are really good about adding velocity and identifying pitch profiles. So if you've got a pretty good changeup and so that's one pitch, you already got 1 plus pitch, and if you can add a little velocity to him, I think that next year we're probably talking Dominic Reed in the Ryan Gallagher role. So if you're worried about losing Gallagher, we'll see where Dominic Reed comes. We're probably not going to see much of him this year. We rarely see college pitchers get a lot of action in minor league baseball post draft, but I think a full off season in the pitch lab with Tread, with Zombro, if Reed comes back and he's throwing if he's averaging 94 miles an hour with that changeup, and kind of a weird angle of attack, that's the kind of guy who looks really good in South Bend. So what does that mean long term? We'll see. But that's the kind of guy who looks really good in South Bend for a half a season. So I wasn't. That would be anybody who's worried about Gallagher. That would be my guess that who pops back through.
Got it. I always love the minor league report. There is even a couple names like you brought up this time that I just haven't heard of, yet. So I always love.
I try to find a couple of fun ones. The Cubs did promote as well Leonel Espinosa today. He is headed to South Bend. Just to get you some details on him and what he's done this year, because I didn't have him pulled up. He's hit pretty well down in Myrtle Beach. He is a bit of a repeater there, but 12% better than league average. He hit 6 home runs in 93 games. Interesting little outfielder out there. And one more deep cut prospect just before I forget, because we're on Myrtle Beach. My other favorite deep cut prospect is Alex Lumpoy. He's an outfielder down in Myrtle Beach. Overall numbers haven't been great this year, but he's electric when you watch him. He had a cycle the other day, a couple weeks ago, hit for a cycle. He's been coming around a little bit, and he is getting some love preseason from I can't remember which evaluator, if it was Callis or Norris or whatever. There's some interesting things to him. His WRC plus is 94. He's striking out 36% of the time. He's 21 down there, but then you look at his most recent numbers, and dating back to July 9th, he has, or even we can go deeper than that. If we go back to June 17th, he's got a 159 WRC plus down in Myrtle Beach. Strikeout rates coming down. It's 32%, which is still lower than what it had been. He's an electric player. And if you can get those, like the contact rate, just like somewhat under control, this is like, there's some juice there. So we'll see where he goes. So I guess you got a bonus deep cut prospect from me on the topic.
Love it. Northside Baseball Podcast, Mitch Woodmeyer, Jason Ross with you. Let's finish up. I thought it'd be fun. Just spend a couple minutes. Current look at the playoff picture. Again, we are recording Tuesday for a Wednesday publish. Cubs enter Tuesday 3 back of the Brewers, but yet they just barely, but they do have the second best record of the National League. So it's kind of like a weird little layout there. Like the Cubs have the second best record in the National League, but if the playoffs started today, the Cubs would be the 4 seed. The byes would go to the Brewers and the Dodgers. Milwaukee just like refuses to lose, and it's not even like the most aesthetically pleasing baseball to watch necessarily.
No.
They beat the Braves on Monday night, and if I'm not mistaken, I watched a few innings of that game. I live in Wisconsin, so I get FanDuel Sports Network, and I had the Cubs. I was watching the Cubs primarily, but I had that game up, and like the Brewers weren't even necessarily doing anything. They had like 1 home run from Isaac Collins. I'm pretty sure they won 3-1 and had 3 hits. Like that, They just, it's not even aesthetically pleasing sometimes, but they won't lose. Milwaukee will not lose. There's a lot of work obviously left to be done for every team in contention, but I just thought it was a fun note. I was looking at a bracket today.
I pulled up the StatCast page from last night. Their expected batting average last night was 172. And it's not like the Braves had a super high one. It was 206. So like neither team was hitting, but like, no, I mean, you're right. Right now.
I watched a few innings of it and I was like, this is not fun baseball to watch, but the Brewers win.
They're winning like 3 out of every 4 games. So like, listen, when you're hot, you're hot. Things are just breaking. I think last night's Brewers Braves games probably in many ways mirrored the Cubs game. From last night, the Cubs Reds game, where it was just like it becomes frustrating on both ends. And it was a frustrating as hell game last night, but it's like one of those things where like it felt like everything that could go wrong for the Cubs is going wrong for the Cubs right now. What was it? I think it was a 36 mile an hour swinging bunt that Brian Hayes had on a terrible at bat. I mean, it was a god awful at bat. CB Buckner missed the first strike, which was, I don't even understand where CB Buckner thought it was, because he called strike. The second strike was lower and farther out of lower was below it and further off the plate. Than the first pitch. Both of them were in the strike zone, but like I don't even know what your thinking process is on it. And then you have the Brewers, who have basically no offensive juice at all, score 3 runs. It's crazy right now. Sometimes things are just working in
Yeah.
weird ways. It feels like everything's going the Brewers way, whereas nothing is going the Cubs way.
Yeah, Brewers just can't push the wrong button right now, no matter
No.
what. It's crazy. Two other things I wanted to add. Again, this is a just for fun type note, and there's so many teams log jammed in the National League. Like, surely this will change. But if the playoffs did start today on this Tuesday, it would be Cubs Mets in the wild card round. And one thing I took note of, Jason, that I'm really, really circling. Obviously, the first thing I've circled is that 5-game series at Wrigley Field coming up later this month between the Cubs and the Brewers. 5-game series, doubleheader on Monday to get it going, and then they play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But I don't know if you noticed this. I'm sure you probably did. Following that 5-game set with the Brewers, which could decide a whole hell of a lot in how the NL Central takes form, the Cubs after that have a 24-game stretch, 24 games in a row, where they do not face a team currently above 500. And so that to me is figure out a way to take 3 of 5 from Milwaukee. 4 of 5 would be tremendous. 5 of 5 on being really, 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 really greedy. After that, though, you have 24 games, Jason. Not a single team over 500 currently. That is where they need to pounce, capitalize. Right now, too, right, against the Reds. Like, obviously, I'm not saying take days off against these other teams. I'm just saying if there's a spot to pounce on the schedule right after a 5-game set with Milwaukee, which could tell
the right time to get hot.
The NL Central, you have 24 games in a row against sub 500 teams, and that has to be a spot where they capitalize on. And I think your furry friend agrees. Like that's just got to be a spot.
First day back at work today. We're very much a part of the podcast tonight.
Yeah.
It's the playoffs. It's so weird right now. But on one hand, if the Cubs were in any other division, they're in first place, right? They're in first place by percentage points. They're in the one division right now, which they're not. Where at the beginning of the season, if you said, "Listen, the Cubs have the second best record. What place are they in the NL Central?" You'd say, "Oh my God, they got to be 5 games up."
Yeah.
Right? And, instead they're 3 games back. So it's a little weird. Things just feel like right now, and I know they feel inevitable to a lot of people right now, where they just feel like the Brewers are not going to stop, and the Cubs just can't do anything right. And there's going to be a time, almost guaranteed, between now and the end of the season where that flips. How many games that flips for, and what happens after that flip it's not me saying that it's going to be the Cubs who win the division because of that, but there's going to be a 5 to 10 game stretch where the Brewers can't do anything right, and the Cubs are doing everything right, and that's just the way it's going to work probably. For the Cubs in the playoff picture, obviously, you definitely want to avoid the wild card round with the pitching issues that the Cubs kind of have.
Yep.
Would save some innings. You would feel a little bit more comfortable with it. We'll see where they end up going. I don't think the Brewers are going anywhere, but on the flip side, I don't think the Cubs are going anywhere either. You mentioned a great thing on the schedule about how easy it gets.
24 games in a row, man, is crazy.
Yeah,
Sub 500, one team after another.
That's the time to nail them. So we'll see what ends up happening. It feels kind of like at this point with the Cubs and like with Kyle Tucker, it almost feels like they need to break the dam in some way. Like there's a lot of pent up energy going on right here, whether it's, with the offense and with like the emotions, and you kind of thought maybe the Justin Turner like walk-off home run was going to like
be a jolt,
be the dam break. I almost wonder if maybe last night the frustrations will boil over today in a positive way. Because last night was frustrating as hell. I mean, it was one of those games where you look at it and literally everything kind of went against the Cubs. And it's in a weird way, like Nick Lodolo getting knocked out in the second inning, like worked against the Cubs because they had a lineup that was completely built to hit against lefties. And after the second inning, gone, right? And I'm not saying that that's the only reason they lost. They lost because CB Buckner is horrible, a terrible umpire, and that didn't help. Brian Hayes is a horrible hitter, and his horrible hitter and his horrible at bat led to a single. The 2-strike pitch that Caleb Thielbar had to TJ Friedel was lovely. That was a perfectly executed curveball that's low and away, and he got his bat out and he got it. That's all bad luck. The Cubs have the double play with Pete Carl Armstrong on first base. There's nothing you can really do there. I know people are probably going to blame him, but like, I don't he was getting such a good secondary lead. I don't think there was anything he could really do to get back on there. People blamed him for not stealing, but it was a really hard place to steal there because you just knew Santayen was just going to throw fastball after fastball, and they're 97 miles an hour. Tyler Stevenson's not a bad catcher. You've got no outs. You don't want to run into a second out right there. Ended up accidentally running into one anyway. It's just a bad luck game. So,
yeah,
I'm kind of hoping that the frustrations from last night boil over a little bit to tonight. The offense can kind of take it out of them. Seiya Suzuki's taking the night off. Willie Castro is just, he's going to play every position.
Versatility, man.
Yeah,
Holy
I love
crap.
it. I do love it. He's getting guys days off. So we'll see what ends up happening. I think ultimately there's going to be a day in the next couple of weeks where I think it starts to flip. The Brewers are not going to win 3 out of every 4 games. The Cubs are not going to have Ke'Bryan Hayes hit 36-mile-an-hour singles. These are inevitable things that will have to not continue. And when those things don't continue, then it's really on. And so yeah, I would like if the Cubs could win though, because even like I pretty even keeled, and even by the end of last night, I was like, yeah, I'm done with baseball.
Boiling over. Yeah,
I was a little frustrated too.
Ke'Bryan Hayes at bat sounds like it's really eating at you. I don't blame you. Man.
That was
it was annoying. It was very annoying.
That might be the most annoying at bat of the season because he struck out like on 3 pitches that were not even debatable. They were great pitches. He struck out. Didn't get one of the calls that you need. Then you throw a perfectly executed inside pitch that's off the plate that he swings at. He hits for under 36 miles an hour. And then like it just felt inevitable at that point. You're like, yeah, TJ Friedel's going to get a hit off of Thielbar and everything, and they're going to lose 3-2. And it happened, and it was frustrating. And it was just one of those games where it just felt like everything was going to go wrong, and it did. It was a frustrating loss. Is that Ke'Bryan Hayes bat is just like I think it was a perfect microcosm for last night. The Cubs did literally everything right in that plate appearance, and they still lost. And I'm not saying that they did literally everything right last night. They didn't hit the ball particularly great, but I don't think either team really deserved to win that game. And if the way that the Reds ended up winning it was because of the Ke'Bryan nonsense, then you feel a little hard done by it. So hopefully we can just let that go behind us. They go get a win tonight, and we can start the positives now. And next week when we're talking about these things, it's like, oh, hey, Cubs are they're tied for the division lead. They had a really good week.
Yeah, let's hope for that. Good guy to go on the mound tonight, Tuesday night. Shota Imanaga going for the Cubs game 2 of the series against Cincinnati. As Jason said, hopefully next week at this time we're talking about the Cubs having turned the page, flip the switch, whatever descriptor you want to use. 3 back of the Brewers entering play on Tuesday. We'll see how it looks when we record next week. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Widmeyer. This has been the Northside Baseball Podcast.